The screen is black. A sound, papers shuffling, fast, desperate. My voice cuts through the silence, calm but tight with something underneath, something cold. 5 years ago, my mother missed my doctoral graduation ceremony to attend my brother's backyard barbecue. She said the weather was perfect. She said his potato salad was once in a lifetime. She said my doctorate could wait. That day, I swallowed it. I smiled. I took pictures. I even helped her pick out a dress. The screen slowly fades in. I'm sitting in a lawyer's office. Modern, glass walls, cold light from outside. I'm holding a thin folder. My hands are steady. My face gives nothing away. The lawyer across from me, Marcus Chen, early 50s, sharp eyes, slides a document forward. "This is everything we need," I say quietly. "Every email, every text, every bank transfer, every voice memo. She kept a diary for 30 years. I found it 3 weeks ago. She documented her own lies." Marcus leans back. He's seen thousands of cases. But something about me, the way I've organized this, the completeness of it, makes him pause. "Your family still has no idea you're doing this?" he asks. I look up at him, just for a second, long enough to see myself reflected in his eyes. "Not yet," pull back, rewind, 3 years earlier. I was different then. Still was, but softer around the edges. Younger in the way that matters, not in years. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32. I work as a research analyst for a pharmaceutical company. Good salary, decent apartment in the city. I run 3 mornings a week. I have 2 close friends. I read books. I cook Sunday dinners. I volunteer at the women's shelter once a month. My life was small, but I liked it small. Quiet, manageable. The doctorate took me 6 years. 6 years of night classes while working full-time. 6 years of sacrificed weekends, empty bank account, countless cups of cold coffee at 2 a.m. My dissertation was on adaptive treatment protocols for trauma survivors. 12 months writing. 3 months of defense prep. 12 people in the committee interview room. When the committee chairman said the word approved, I didn't cry. I texted my mother instead. "Mom, I did it. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell." She was making dinner, pot roast. She texted back 3 hours later. "That's wonderful, sweetie. So proud. By the way, can you make it Saturday? Thomas wants to host a barbecue for work friends. Says he's been working hard on his new grill." Thomas is my older brother, 2 years older. He's a regional sales manager at a car dealership. He makes good money. He has a nice house. He throws barbecues every other month. My graduation was the same Saturday. I didn't even think about it. I assumed she meant a different Saturday. I sent her the graduation invitation again with a note. "Starts at 2 p.m. Can't wait to have you there." She called me that Wednesday. "Honey, about Saturday." My stomach already knew. I can't miss Thomas's barbecue. His boss is coming. His boss from the regional office. This is a big deal for him. It's a career moment. You understand career moments, don't you? I was sitting at my work desk. My coworker Rebecca was across from me, pretending not to listen while very much listening. "Mom, my graduation is Saturday, the ceremony, the one we talked about, remember, my doctorate." "Yes, sweetheart, that's wonderful. We can celebrate after. When does your ceremony end?" 4 p.m. Thomas's starts at 1. His boss would arrive early. I can't just leave him. You know how he gets. You know how hard this matters to him. I said nothing. "Sarah, are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "He's your brother. He needs his family there. You're done. You have your degree, but he's still working. He's still building. You can understand that, can't you?" That was the moment something cracked inside me. Not visibly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just felt something inside turn a different color. "It's fine, Mom. Go to the barbecue." "You're not mad?" "No." "You are. I can hear it in your voice." "I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed." That word hung there, disappointed, and I watched her flinch through the phone line, even though phones don't transmit flinches. "Sarah, don't do this." Do what? Make me feel guilty. I hate when you do that. And there it was. I made her feel guilty for choosing my brother over my doctorate. I was the problem. I'm not trying to make you feel anything, Mom. I'm just telling you how I feel. Well, it's not fair. Thomas has been struggling. You're strong. You're smart. You can handle disappointment. He needs encouragement. That Saturday, I walked into the auditorium alone. My father died when I was 16, heart attack, sudden, the kind that doesn't leave time for goodbyes. My mother and brother were all I had, and my brother didn't come either. He was setting up. I wore the black robe. I stood when my name was called. I walked across the stage. I took the diploma from the department chair. The camera flashed. No one clapped louder than the person next to me, a stranger's parent there for a different graduate. I kept a copy of that photo. Me in my robe, holding the diploma, smiling like someone had just told me a joke I was pretending to understand. My mother did come to celebrate after. She brought Thomas. They took me to dinner, Italian place, my favorite. Thomas ordered an expensive bottle of wine and raised a toast. To my baby sister, the doctor, I always knew you were too smart for your own good. He was smiling, he meant it. There was no malice in Thomas. That was the problem. There was no villain. There was just me being too sensitive, me making everything about myself, me being the difficult one. My mother squeezed my hand under the table. I'm sorry I missed it, baby, but this, right now with you and your brother, this is what matters, family. I squeezed back. I nodded. I let it go. Or I thought I did. 6 months passed. I was fine. I really was. The anger became a low hum underneath everything, something I could almost forget if I didn't listen too hard. Then my mother stopped paying for my car insurance. Not all at once, not with a conversation, just a delinquent notice in my mailbox. My policy had lapsed because the automatic payment she'd set up from her account, set up years ago when I was first starting my career and money was tight, had simply stopped. I called her. Why did you cancel my insurance? I didn't cancel it, honey. I just realized I've been paying for it forever. You make good money now. You need to handle your own responsibilities. Fair, logical, I couldn't argue. Except she was simultaneously paying for Thomas's car insurance, and his mortgage interest, and his vacation last year. I found out when I overheard her on the phone with her financial advisor. Yes, Thomas needs help right now with cash flow. Yes, I know Sarah is independent, but she's also doing fine financially. No, I didn't tell her about his situation. I was standing in her kitchen getting a glass of water. She didn't see me. She was in the dining room on her laptop, voice casual, discussing my brother's cash flow situation like it was a state secret I wasn't cleared for. I was fine. I could pay my own insurance. I had a good salary. This wasn't the thing that broke me. But it was the first time I understood. My mother was financially helping my brother and hiding it from me. Hiding it, I suspected, because she knew I would find it unfair. She knew I would have an opinion about it. So she made a decision without me and presented the appearance of logic after the fact. I started paying closer attention after that. Little things, my mother mentioning Thomas's problems, his rough patch, his struggles with the market. She would tell me these things in a concerned way, like she was sharing, when really she was recruiting me into the narrative that Thomas was the one who needed help, that Thomas was fragile, that Thomas required maternal intervention. It started to make sense why she skipped my graduation. Thomas wasn't strong. Thomas wasn't fine. Thomas needed her. And I had always been the one who could handle things. Then came the investment. I don't know how much money it was. I found out by accident when I was looking through my mother's desk for a power bill she said I needed for my address verification. Legal mail folder. Thomas's LLC, Articles of Incorporation. He was starting a business, an automotive consulting firm. My mother had invested. The paperwork said $180,000. I stood there holding the documents, reading the date on the signature line. 3 months ago, while I was working 50-hour weeks, while she was telling everyone at church how independent I was. I put the papers back exactly where I found them. I didn't ask her about it. I just started organizing my anger into something more useful. I created an email address, auditfullsweep@gmail.com. I didn't use it yet, just had it ready. I started a new folder on my desktop called Personal. I put nothing in it, but I was ready. I did something else too. I reached out to my father's best friend, Uncle Harold. He's a CPA. He'd always been kind to me, the type of uncle who shows up, who remembers birthdays, who asks real questions and listens to real answers. I didn't tell him everything, just asked him to coffee and mentioned, casually, that I was thinking about my long-term financial security. "Do you have an estate plan for your mother?" he asked. "Or documents laying out how her assets are intended to be distributed?" "Not that I know of. Why?" "Because if she doesn't have one and something happens to her, you and your brother will be in a complicated position, especially if there are loans or investments between her and either of you. It gets messy." "What if there are loans but they're undocumented? What if one child borrowed money and the other didn't?" He looked at me for a long moment. He was smart enough to know I wasn't asking hypothetically. "That's a problem. That's a recipe for a lawsuit down the line." I filed that information away. Then, 3 weeks later, everything accelerated. My mother called me on a Tuesday. Her voice was tight, not sad, not angry, just controlled, like she was holding herself very still. "I need you to come over. We need to talk." "About what?" "Not on the phone. Come tonight if you can." When my mother uses that tone, you come. I drove to her house, small, neat, in the suburb where I grew up. She's lived there since my father died. Never wanted to leave. Too many memories, or maybe not enough. Thomas's car was in the driveway. That was unusual. Thomas didn't do surprise visits. Thomas was scheduled, planned. He had his routine and he kept it. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived. She looked smaller than I remembered, though I'd seen her 2 weeks prior. My mind does that, edits people smaller when I'm bracing for something bad. Thomas was in the living room. He stood when I came in, another unusual gesture, and I realized something was seriously wrong. "Sit down," my mother said. I didn't sit. What happened? "The business didn't work out," Thomas said quietly. "The market wasn't ready. My partner bylaid. I didn't want to tell you guys, but—" "Mom gave you money," I said, not a question. My mother's jaw tightened. "Yes." "How much?" "Sarah, this isn't the time." "How much?" $180,000. I looked at Thomas. He was ashamed. I could see it in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. But there was something else too, something like resignation. Like he'd expected this, to fail, to need to be bylaid out, to have someone else manage his consequence. "It's gone?" I asked. "Not entirely," my mother said. "There's possibly a small recovery coming from some asset liquidation, but basically, yes, it's gone. And I need to tell you something else." Here it came. I took out a loan against the house to cover the rest of his losses. $150,000. I didn't want to, but he would have gone bankrupt. His credit is destroyed. He couldn't get a loan, and I couldn't let my son. "You took out a loan on the house that I grew up in, that you and Dad bought together." "Yes." "Without asking me." "It's my house, Sarah." "I know, but it affects my inheritance. It affects my future." The moment the word inheritance left my mouth, I saw my brother flinch. My mother's face went cold. "Is that what this is about, your inheritance?" "No, this is about you making massive financial decisions that have long-term consequences without even mentioning it to me. Thomas's business failed. That's not his fault. That's bad luck and bad timing. But now you've exposed yourself financially and you've hidden it from me, and I'm finding out in a living room ambush." "There's no ambush. I'm telling you now." "You're telling me now because there's a problem now, not because you think I deserve to know." Thomas stood up. "I should go." "No," I said. "Stay. Actually, this is the conversation we should have had 3 years ago when you got the money in the first place. My mother's face went hard. Don't do this. Do what? Don't ask questions. Don't have opinions. Don't hold anyone accountable. Don't make this about you. This is about your brother's crisis. It's about both. It's about the pattern, the insurance, the hiding, the expecting me to just accept whatever happens to me while Thomas gets bailouts and explanations. I was getting angry. I could hear it in my voice. And I hated myself for it because anger makes me sound young, emotional, hysterical, like I'm overreacting. My mother knew this. She'd spent 30 years knowing this. You know what? She said, standing up. I'm not going to sit here and be attacked for loving your brother. That's not what I'm. You've always been this way, keeping score, even as a child. Remember when Thomas got more birthday cake than you because he's bigger? You cried for an hour. It's not fair, it's not fair. Some people are just better at accepting life, Sarah. Some people have perspective. I felt my anger crystallizing into something harder, something sharper. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. I don't like where this is going, my mother said. Have you ever had to choose me over something else? Silence. Have you ever sacrificed something for me the way you've sacrificed for Thomas? That's not a fair question. It is, actually. It's the fairest question, because I already know the answer. My mother sat back down. She looked tired. Your brother needed you to understand that. Understand what? That love isn't equal, that it expands to where it's needed most. You were always so capable, Sarah, from childhood. You didn't need me the way he did, the way he does. I stood there, watching my mother, this woman I'd loved and tried to understand and accommodated my entire adult life, explained to me why I was the wrong person to love as much. I'm going to leave now, I said. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. I'm being clear. I'm leaving, and I'm not going to keep having this conversation. In the car, I sat for 10 minutes before starting the engine. I wasn't crying. That would have been cleaner somehow. Instead, I felt the silence in my own head like a held breath. I called Uncle Harold from my parked car. I need to talk to you about setting up some documents, and I need to understand what my mother's financial obligations are, and what happens if there's money unaccounted for. Are you okay? He asked. No, but I will be. That was the night I stopped being her daughter and started being something else. After that night, my mother did what she always does. She made it about my unreasonableness. She told people, not maliciously, just in casual conversation, that I'd had a problem with her helping Thomas. She framed it like I was jealous, bitter, unable to be happy for my brother's opportunities. Sarah's always been sensitive about money. I overheard her tell her friend Jennifer at the grocery store. I was 2 aisles over, pretending not to listen. Ever since she had to work so hard for her education, I think she resents that things come easier to Thomas. It's complicated. You know how families are. She was gaslighting herself as much as me. She'd rewritten the narrative so cleanly that she almost believed it. She wasn't choosing Thomas over me. I was choosing jealousy over family. I was being difficult. And the problem with being the daughter everyone knows is strong and smart and independent is that no one questions it when you're also labeled bitter. My friends started distancing themselves, not obviously, but Rebecca at work, the one who'd witnessed my mother's original call, suddenly had a lot of lunch meetings. My friend group split invitations. It was subtle enough that I could almost think I was imagining it, but persistent enough that I felt it every day. Thomas called me, just once, left a voicemail. Hey, Sar, just wanted to say I'm sorry about the thing with Mom. I know you're upset, and I get it. But I'm also kind of dying here, and it would be cool if my sister could throw me a bone. We're supposed to be a team, you know? Anyway, yeah, call me if you want. The voicemail was calculated. I realized later that he'd probably discussed it with my mother. Give her space, but guilt her just a little. That's how Sarah works. I didn't call back. 2 months later, I got a Facebook message from my mother. She was friending me. I hadn't been on Facebook in 5 years. Sweetie, can we talk? I feel like we're in a bad place and I miss you. I was also thinking maybe we could do a family dinner. Thomas wants to try his hand at cooking. He's been taking classes. It's so sweet, really. It would mean so much if you came. And I think it would be good for you to spend time together as siblings. Let me know. Love, Mom. She'd copied me. She was building a record. If I said no, I was being the one who wouldn't reconcile. I was being the difficult daughter. I didn't respond. The next week, my mother called my work. Not my cell phone, my office line. Hi, this is Sarah Mitchell. Honey, it's Mom. I know you've been screening my calls and I didn't want to be intrusive, but I'm getting worried about your mental health. This isn't like you, to hold a grudge like this. I was sitting at my desk. My coworkers could hear me. How did you get this number? It's on your email signature from a work thing you sent me. Sarah, we need to talk about whether you should be in therapy. This kind of resentment. I'm at work. Which is why I'm calling. You've been avoiding me. That's not healthy. I hung up the phone. She called back immediately. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I listened to it in the bathroom stall 10 minutes later. Sarah, please don't do this. I love you. I would never want to hurt you. But I also won't be made to feel like a bad mother because I love your brother. That's not fair and you know it. Call me, please. That was the moment I understood. My mother was going to win this by default if I didn't do something. She had already written a story where she was the worried parent and I was the ungrateful, vindictive daughter. And everyone around me was already starting to believe it. I needed proof. Not of her choices. I already knew her choices. I needed documentation that she'd lied about the scope of her financial help to Thomas, that she'd hidden investments and loans, that she'd presented a false narrative to me about our financial relationship. I was going to need her own words. I started with the diary. My mother had kept a journal since my father died. She'd never been secretive about it. I'd seen it on her nightstand 1,000 times, a leather-bound book, updated almost daily in her neat cursive. I knew where she kept it. Bedroom closet, top shelf, behind the stack of winter sweaters nobody wore. I went to her house while she was at book club. Thomas had given her a spare key, which I found hanging in the garage. The same garage where we used to build things with my father. I took the diary to a FedEx office and photographed every page with my phone. 63 pages. Careful, detailed entries going back 4 years. The entries were the kind of documentation I needed. Gave Thomas $25,000 today for his emergency fund. Didn't tell Sarah. She would judge me. She's always so critical of how I spend my money. It's my money. I earned it. Thomas asked for another $50,000 today. I told him yes. His business partner is becoming a problem. He's in over his head. I can't let him drown. Sarah wouldn't understand. She doesn't understand that maternal love means sacrifice. Had terrible dream that Sarah found out about the loan. She looked at me with such disappointment. Even in the dream, she was making me feel guilty. I hate when she does that. Why can't she just be happy like Thomas? Why does she have to complicate everything? The business is failing. Thomas admitted it today. I am devastated. I've given him $180,000. I can't tell Sarah. She'll say, I told you so. She'll remind me that I should have been more careful. She doesn't understand that being a mother sometimes means being foolish. She doesn't understand that some of us feel things deeply. And then, the entry from the night of the confrontation. Sarah came to the house today and attacked me for helping Thomas. She called it unfair and unaccountable. As if her needs are the only ones that matter. As if her doctorate makes her better than his struggles. I had to explain to her that love isn't equal. That some of us simply need more. I think she finally understands that she was wrong to be so judgmental. Why is it that having a daughter who's strong and independent is so exhausting? Why can't she just be grateful that she doesn't need me like Thomas does? I feel completely unseen in this family. I photographed all 63 pages. Then I put the diary back exactly where I found it. On my way out, I left a note on the kitchen counter. Mom wanted to pick up some things I left here. Didn't want to interrupt book club. Love, Sarah. I didn't sign it as Dr. Sarah or anything. Just my name, simple, innocent. She would find it and think I'd been there. She would notice nothing missing. She would never suspect the diary was photographed. That was the moment everything changed. I had her words, not yelling, not angry, just her explaining to herself why she was allowed to choose Thomas over me, why her investment in him mattered more than her investment in me, why my hurt feelings were actually my problem. I created a secure folder on my cloud storage and uploaded all the photos. I named it Documentation Archive Private. I backed it up in 3 places. Then I waited. And I listened. I started recording my conversations with my mother. Legally, I'm in a one-party consent state, which means I could record without telling her. I researched this carefully. I called her back a week after she'd called my work. "Hi, Mom. Oh, thank God. I've been so worried about you." "I know. I'm sorry I haven't called. I've just been thinking about everything." "And what have you concluded?" Her question was too quick, too practiced. She had been waiting for this call. "That you're right, that I was being selfish, that I should be more understanding about Thomas's situation." I could hear her relax through the phone line. "I'm so glad you see that now. I really am. You know, I've been worried that you were spiraling a little bit. The way you were talking, the things you were saying." "I know, and I regret that. I think I was stressed about work and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." "It's okay. You're okay now, and that's what matters." "Actually, I wanted to ask you something about the business investment. I've been thinking about it, and I realized I don't actually understand the details. Can you walk me through what happened? Not to judge, just to understand better. For closure, I guess." She was quiet for a moment, calculating whether this was a trap or genuine reconciliation. "Of course, honey, I can do that." And she did. She walked me through the entire investment, the amount, when it happened, why she did it, how she didn't tell me because she knew I'd overreact like I always do, how she'd borrowed against the house because it was necessary, how she expected there would be some recovery but it was looking unlikely. She was calm, she was reasonable, she was explaining herself like she had nothing to hide because from her perspective she didn't. She was a mother helping her struggling son. I recorded all of it. Then I did it again, and again. 5 separate phone calls over the next month, each time steering her toward some detail she hadn't mentioned before, each time recording her explanations, her rationalizations, her gentle corrections of my misunderstanding. In one call, I asked her directly, "Mom, why did you never tell me about the loan?" And she said, "I can quote it exactly because I have the recording, because I knew you would make it about yourself. You would say something like, 'Well, what about my future?' And it would make everything about your needs when this was about helping your brother survive a crisis. I couldn't deal with your judgment on top of everything else." There it was. She hadn't told me not to protect herself from a mistake. She hadn't told me because she knew I would have opinions about it. And my opinions, my valid, reasonable opinions, were positioned as judgment, as selfishness, as the same narcissism that made me upset when my brother got extra birthday cake at age 8. I also started attending family dinners. That was strategic too. I needed to be the model of reconciliation. I needed everyone, Thomas, my mother, extended family, friends they told, to see me as the one who'd worked through my jealousy, the one who was bigger than the drama. I brought wine. I complimented my mother's cooking. I asked Thomas about his consulting work, even though we all knew he was back looking for a job to pay off debt. I laughed at jokes. I helped clear the table. I was the perfect daughter. But inside, I was documenting. I started writing down dates and details of these dinners, what was said, what was implied, how my mother would bring up moments from my childhood where I'd been difficult in front of Thomas, the way you'd re-establish a pattern for an audience. "Do you remember when you were 14 and Sarah got upset because Thomas got a PlayStation for his birthday?" she'd say to Thomas's girlfriend. "And we'd given her money for her college fund instead. She actually cried. She said it was unfair." as if money directly translates to love. And everyone would laugh. And I would smile. But I was building a file. Incident after incident of my mother's narrative being reinforced. The story of Sarah, the ungrateful, ambitious, resentful daughter, was being solidified. And each time it was told, it became harder for anyone to listen to me without that filter in place. That was when I understood what she'd done. She hadn't just made a financial choice that affected me. She'd gotten ahead of the story. She'd made sure that when I eventually reacted, when I eventually pushed back, I would already be framed as the problem. It was brilliant, actually. It was gaslighting on a generational scale. And it was about to become very, very dangerous for her. Something shifts in a person when they fully understand they've been set up. It's not gradual, it's a switch. One day, you're still hopping, there's been a misunderstanding. That people you love have simply made mistakes and meant well. The next day, you see the mechanics of it. You see how someone you trusted constructed a narrative so carefully that the truth became impossible to tell without sounding like you're attacking them. I was at work when it happened for me. I was in a meeting with my team. We were presenting research on a new drug interaction protocol. 15 people, serious meeting, serious stakes. I was presenting the data, clean, comprehensive, irrefutable. Halfway through, my boss interrupted me. "You know, one thing I appreciate about Sarah," he said to the room, "is that she doesn't let emotion cloud her judgment. Even when she disagrees with something, she sticks to the facts. That's rare. That's valuable." He meant it as a compliment. But in my head, I heard my mother's voice. Why can't she just be happy like Thomas? Happy, not honest, happy. And I realized I had spent my entire adult life being valued for my ability to not feel things, for my capacity to swallow hurt and keep moving, for my willingness to let other people's narratives override my own truth. And it had served my mother perfectly. As long as I was strong, she didn't have to feel guilty about choosing my brother. As long as I was independent, she didn't have to acknowledge the sacrifices I'd made while she reserved her emotional energy for his struggles. I was not just her daughter. I was her justification. After the meeting, I went to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My face was blank, composed, ready for whatever came next. I didn't cry. I stopped crying after that day, not because I wasn't sad anymore, but because I understood that sadness was a luxury I couldn't afford. Sadness makes you vulnerable. Vulnerability makes you forgettable. And I was done being forgettable. When I got home that night, I opened the encrypted folder on my computer where I'd been storing evidence. The diary photos, the recordings, the written documentation of every conversation, every incident, every moment where my mother had positioned my reasonable boundaries as my character flaws. I started a new document. I titled it Timeline and Narrative Reconstruction. I was going to build something bulletproof. I called Uncle Harold and asked if I could meet him for lunch. Not coffee this time. Formal, serious. We met at a small restaurant near his office. He ordered a salad. I ordered nothing and picked at bread instead. "I need to understand inheritance law," I said. "Specifically, if someone has made undocumented loans to one child but not others, what happens?" He put his fork down. "Sarah, what's going on? Just answer the question first." So he did. He explained that undocumented loans, money given to one child with the expectation or implication that it would be repaid, but without a promissory note or legal agreement, create serious complications. The person giving the money might intend it as a loan but have no way to enforce repayment. Or they might intend it as a gift, but the other children might argue it should have been documented as a debt, meaning the person giving the money had less to distribute. "But here's the thing," he said. "If there's written evidence that the person intended it as something specific, that can be used to clarify intent. Like a diary." He looked at me carefully. "Like a diary, yes. Diary entries where someone explains their reasoning for giving money to one child and not others can be very relevant to how a court interprets their intentions. And what if the diary also shows that the person knows they're making unfair choices? What if they document their own unfairness? That would be evidence of intent. That would matter. I waited. What I'm hearing, he said slowly, is that you're not asking hypothetically anymore. No. And I'm guessing that your mother doesn't know you have this information. Correct. He put his napkin down and looked at me for a long moment. Are you sure about this? Once you go down this road, it doesn't stop. You understand that? I understand. Your mother will never forgive you. She already hasn't. He nodded slowly. Okay then, here's what we need to do. Over the next 2 months, Uncle Harold became my co-conspirator. He helped me understand the legal implications of everything I had. He introduced me to an estate attorney, Martin Yates, who specialized in family disputes and inheritance complications. I went to his office on a Tuesday afternoon. I had everything with me, printed copies of the diary pages, transcripts of the recorded conversations, detailed timeline of events, bank statements showing the investments, copies of the loan documentation against the house. Martin read through it carefully. He took notes. He didn't interrupt. When he finished, he sat back in his chair and looked at me. This is very thorough, he said. I wanted you to know what you were working with. I do, and I want you to know what working with me is going to entail. First, your mother doesn't know you have any of this. Correct. Second, she's going to find out eventually, and when she does, she's going to be devastated and angry, and she's probably going to convince your brother and extended family that you're being cruel and vindictive. I know. Third, this case, if it becomes a case, is not going to be about money. It's going to be about control and narrative and who gets to define the truth of this family. And that's infinitely more painful than any financial settlement. I understand. And you still want to proceed. I thought about every family dinner, every moment I'd smiled while my mother rewrote the story of why I was the difficult one, every time I'd swallowed my hurt to make her more comfortable. Yes, I still want to proceed. He leaned forward. Then here's what I need from you. I need you to keep living your life exactly as you have been. I need you to keep attending family dinners and keeping up appearances. Because once we move forward, your mother is going to look back at every moment we're having now and try to figure out where it all changed. And I don't want her to see us coming. How long? As long as it takes to be absolutely certain we have everything we need. Maybe 6 months. Maybe a year. Can you do that? I thought about my mother, sitting at her kitchen table, updating her diary, explaining to herself why her choices were justified. Yes, I said, I can do that. I became an actress. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every moment. I performed the role of the reconciled daughter so perfectly that I almost convinced myself it was real. But underneath, I was different. I was methodical. I was cold. I was getting ready. The documents started appearing in my evidence file like pieces of a puzzle I was building in reverse. I hired a private investigator. Not for drama, for specificity. His name was David Chen, and he was a retired insurance fraud investigator. Martin had recommended him. David was the kind of person who asked questions the way a surgeon uses a scalpel, minimal, precise, designed to open exactly where needed. I wanted him to trace every financial transaction related to my mother's loan to Thomas. I wanted to know if the $180,000 was actually $180,000, or if there had been additional money I didn't know about. I wanted to know if Thomas had made any repayment attempts, even token ones, that might suggest this was actually a loan rather than a gift. David took 2 months. He came back with a 40-page report. The money had been transferred in 6 increments: $30,000, $25,000, $50,000, $40,000, $20,000, $15,000. Over the course of 4 months, There had been one check written from Thomas back to my mother, $5,000, dated 9 months after the last transfer, marked partial repayment. That single check was going to matter, because it suggested, even if minimally, that Thomas knew this was meant to be a loan. But my mother's diary entries suggested she'd never explicitly told him it needed to be repaid, which meant the $5,000 was almost a gesture, a son acknowledging that he owed something to his mother, even if his mother had never officially asked for it back. It was the kind of detail that a good attorney could use to paint a picture of a family dynamic where everyone understood the truth, but no one was willing to say it out loud. I also got access to my mother's financial records. This was trickier. Legally, I couldn't just subpoena them, but she'd given me power of attorney when my father was dying and had never officially revoked it. It was a gray area, legally questionable, but I had the documents. I reviewed 16 years of her tax returns. I found something interesting. Every year, she claimed Thomas as a dependent. Not financially, he made too much money for that to be legitimate, but she claimed it anyway, year after year, which meant she was benefiting from a tax deduction she wasn't legally entitled to. It was small fraud, the kind of thing millions of people probably did without thinking, but it was fraud. And it was documented. I copied those returns and added them to my file. Next, I went after the house. The property records showed that my mother had taken out a second mortgage for $150,000. The date on that document aligned with the date in her diary when she'd written, "Thomas asked for another $50,000 today." She'd actually taken on debt to cover his business losses. That debt had been in her name. That debt would be part of her estate, which meant that when she died, that debt would be subtracted from what was left for me and Thomas to inherit. Unless Thomas repaid it, which he hadn't, and my mother hadn't put any pressure on him to do so. The estate attorney explained the implications. If your mother dies with significant debt against her house, the house gets sold to pay the debt. Whatever's left, if anything, gets divided. But the primary impact is that the asset disappears. You don't get to inherit a house. You inherit debt. I added this to my file too. Then I did something that still makes my stomach tight when I think about it. I hired a therapist. Not for therapy, though God knows I probably needed it. For documentation. I found a therapist in the city, Dr. Patricia Williams, and I scheduled sessions. Once a week, I came in and I talked about my family. And I took detailed notes after each session. Not notes on what Dr. Williams said, notes on what I'd said. Documented statements about my experience with my mother's treatment. Dated entries with quotes of things she'd said to me. Clinical documentation of emotional manipulation and gaslighting. Patient reports mother making her feel responsible for mother's choices. Patient identifies pattern of being reframed as judgmental when expressing reasonable boundaries. Patient notes correlation between her achievement and mother's distancing behaviors. Patient reports mother prioritizing brother's emotional needs over her own, to the degree of missing major life event. Every week, new documentation. By month 6, I had 40 pages of clinical notes about my relationship with my mother, written by a licensed therapist and available as corroborating evidence to a court if needed. I was building a case. But more importantly, I was building a narrative. I was creating a story, with documents and dates and expert testimony. That was so airtight, so comprehensive, so factually grounded that no one could dismiss it as Sarah being emotional or Sarah not understanding her mother's perspective. This was evidence. This was truth. And the truth was, I had been systematically, carefully, intentionally sidelined by my own mother in favor of my brother. And when I objected, I'd been gaslighted into believing it was my problem. By month 8, I was ready to move to the next phase. I scheduled a meeting with Martin, the estate attorney. His office was quiet on a Tuesday morning, just me and him and everything I'd accumulated. "Walk me through it," he said. So I did. I went through the timeline, The financial transactions, the diary entries, the therapy documentation, the investigator's report, the tax fraud, the loan against the house, the single token repayment from Thomas. Martin took notes. "Here's what I think," he said when I finished. "I think you have enough to file a claim challenging your mother's competency to make financial decisions if that becomes relevant. I think you have enough to challenge how an estate gets divided if your mother dies. I think you have enough to potentially force a civil suit regarding the undocumented loan and demand full accounting of how your mother's assets have been distributed. But I also think that none of that is actually what you want." "What do you mean?" "I mean that you could go to court with this and spend 5 years, $100,000, and every relationship you have, and end up winning a judgment that your brother actually pays back some portion of the $180,000, which he probably can't do, which would damage him financially, which would destroy your family irreparably. Or you could do something smarter." "Like what?" "Like use what you have to force a conversation. A real conversation, where your mother has to actually confront what she's done instead of being able to hide behind narrative." I understood what he was saying. A lawsuit was for winning. But there were other ways to win. Quieter ways. I found out about the will in a way that changed everything. I was at my mother's house, looking for something she'd asked me to grab, tax papers, I think, though I wasn't really paying attention. I was checking the guest room closet when I knocked over a box. Files spilled everywhere. And among them, a sealed envelope. Last WILL and Testament of MARGARET private and confidential. My mother had made a will and hadn't told either of us. She hadn't asked me to be her executor. She hadn't discussed what she wanted. She hadn't even mentioned that she'd gone to the trouble of making a legal document about how her estate would be distributed. I held the envelope for a long moment. I didn't open it. I wouldn't violate her privacy that way. But I photographed the envelope with my phone, documenting that it existed, the date it was filed, the attorney's name on the letterhead. Then I put everything back exactly as it had been. When I got home, I called Martin. "She has a will. She made one and didn't tell me, and I'm guessing from the way she's living, it probably doesn't split her estate equally. You want me to request a copy? Is that legal? If we file a family matter, yes. If we request it as part of a discovery process, yes. If you just ask her attorney for a copy without a legal basis, no. But there are ways." "Do it." It took 2 weeks, but Martin got the will. My mother had written it with an attorney 18 months ago. Thomas got the house. Thomas got $300,000 from her retirement account. Thomas got her car. I got $50,000. And a note. The note said, "To my daughter Sarah, who has never needed me the way your brother does, I leave this small sum as a token of my love, knowing that you will build a better life than this amount could ever provide. Your strength has always been a gift to our family." It was the cruelest thing she could have written, because it made my marginalization look like a compliment. She'd positioned $50,000, compared to $300,000 plus a house plus a car, as something that made sense because I was strong. Even in her will, from beyond the grave, she was going to gaslight me. I sat with that document for 3 days without moving. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat with the knowledge that my mother had made a legal document that would outlive her, that would tell me, from beyond her death, that my strength made me undeserving of her support, that my competence made me worth less. When I finally got up, I was different. Not angry. Just absolutely clear. There was no path forward that involved my mother understanding what she'd done. There was no conversation that would make her see me the way I needed to be seen. Because she fundamentally believed that love should be unequal. That some people deserved protection and others deserved to be strong enough not to need it. And she would die believing this. But I didn't have to. I called Martin. "I want to contest the will." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that she was not in a sound state of mind when she wrote it. on the grounds that she was suffering from narcissistic delusion, on the grounds that the disparity is so extreme it suggests undue influence or mental deterioration. That's going to be difficult to prove without a mental health evaluation done at the time of the will. I have documentation from Dr. Williams. 18 months of therapy notes documenting the patterns of emotional manipulation and gaslighting. That suggests a personality disorder. That suggests someone who is not capable of thinking clearly about fairness or justice. Martin was quiet. You understand this means you're going to have to go public with all of this. You're going to have to stand in front of a judge and explain how your mother manipulated you. Your family will know everything. I understand. And you're doing this anyway. I'm doing this because she left me a will that tells me my worth is my strength, and I'm not going to let that stand, not even after she's dead. There was a pause. Okay, but before we file anything, there's something else you need to know. I hired an investigator on your behalf, separate from the private investigator you hired, to look into the will itself, to see if there were any procedural issues or concerns about its validity. And your mother's attorney was also your mother's financial advisor. He stands to benefit from the will as written because it ensures maximum money stays in accounts where he charges management fees. That's a conflict of interest. That's potentially grounds for undue influence, not by your mother, but by her attorney. I felt something click into place. This wasn't just about my mother's choices anymore. There were other people with incentive to keep her making certain choices. There were other people who benefited from her loving Thomas more. How does that change things? I asked. It means we might have more leverage than you think. It means your mother's attorney might be very interested in settling this quietly rather than having those conflicts examined in open court. I felt something dark settle into my chest. Power. For the first time, I had actual power. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I didn't go to her house. I didn't call her in advance. Instead, I had my attorney send a formal letter. It arrived on a Thursday. I knew she'd gotten it because Thomas called me that evening. He was panicked. Sarah, what the hell is this? A lawyer's letter about contesting Mom's will. Are you serious right now? I'm completely serious. But why would you? She's still alive. She's fine. Why would you do this now? Because she needs to know she's been documented, I thought. Because she needs to understand that her gaslighting has consequences. Because I need her to see me. But I didn't say that to my brother. Because I need her to understand how her choices have affected me, and I don't think she's going to listen any other way. He hung up. I'd expected that. The next day, my mother called. She was crying, actual tears. How could you do this to me? How could you take out a lawsuit against your own mother? It's not a lawsuit. It's a formal challenge to your will. It's a legal process. It's the only way to make sure that. I don't care what it's called. You are suing me, your own mother, while I'm still alive. You are bringing a lawyer into our family business. How could you be so cruel? Mom, I have always supported you. I have always loved you. And this is how you repay me, by attacking me legally, by getting strangers involved in our family. Sarah, I don't recognize you right now. That's because you've never actually looked at me. Silence. I have spent my entire life trying to be what you needed me to be. I've been strong so you didn't have to worry. I've been independent so you could focus on Thomas. I've been okay with less so that Thomas could have more. And when I finally asked you to acknowledge that, you made me feel like I was the problem, like my hurt was selfish, like my questions were judgmental. And now you've written a will that tells me, legally, financially, definitively, that I was right to feel less than. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. You left me $50,000 and wrote a note saying I don't need help because I'm strong. You left Thomas $300,000 and a house because he's fragile. And you documented this. You made it legal. And you did it 18 months ago without telling me, without discussing it, without asking if I agreed. Sarah, that's not what I meant. What did you mean then? Explain it to me, honestly. Explain how it's fair. She was crying harder now. I can't explain it because it's not fair. It's not fair, and I know it's not fair, and I can't justify it. That was the moment I almost stopped. That was the moment my mother actually admitted she was wrong. And I could have accepted that. I could have forgiven her in that moment and let the whole thing go. But then she said something else. But Sarah, you have to understand, Thomas was going through such a difficult time. And you were okay. You were managing. I did what I had to do. And there it was. The gaslighting, the justification, the reframing of her cruelty as necessity. She wasn't admitting she was wrong. She was explaining why she was right. I'm not going to continue this conversation, I said quietly. Sarah, please. My attorney will be in touch. I suggest you hire your own. I hung up the phone. 3 weeks later, we had a mediation appointment. Martin had arranged it. It was neutral ground. A small conference room in downtown with a mediator present and both mothers represented by counsel. My mother brought her attorney, Richard Hendricks, the same man who drafted her will and who stood to benefit from it. She also brought Thomas. Thomas sitting beside her was a tactic. It was meant to show me that I was attacking not just my mother, but my entire family, that I was the one creating division. I didn't bring anyone. Just me and Martin. The mediator, a woman named Sarah Johnson, the irony of sharing a name with her was not lost on me, explained the process. We're here to see if the parties can come to an agreement about the disputed will. Sarah is alleging that her mother's will reflects a bias that suggests either undue influence or lack of capacity. Margaret is disputing that characterization. We'll hear from both sides and see if we can find common ground. Martin presented first. He laid out his argument cleanly. The disparity between what Thomas received and what I received. The documented pattern of financial favoritism going back years. The therapy notes suggesting my mother's judgment was impaired by narcissistic patterns. The conflict of interest with her attorney. He presented it all without emotion. Just facts. Just a logical case that said, the will as written does not reflect a fair or balanced distribution, and the circumstances around its creation suggest it may not reflect the mother's true values. Then my mother's attorney responded. He was good. He was smooth. He explained that mothers have the right to distribute their assets as they see fit, that personality traits are not the same as mental incapacity, that a preferential distribution to one child is not illegal. Ms. Margaret Mitchell is entitled to love her children differently, he said. She is entitled to recognize different needs. She is entitled to plan for her children's futures in ways she sees fit. He said it like it was obvious. Like I was the unreasonable one for challenging a mother's right to love her children unequally. Then he did something else. And I would note, he said carefully, that Ms. Sarah has been undergoing regular therapy, which suggests she may be experiencing emotional difficulties that are coloring her perception of her mother's intentions. He was using the therapy documentation against me. He was using the fact that I'd sought mental health support to suggest I was unstable. It was a sleazy move. It was also effective. I felt my anger rise, and then I felt it crystallize into something cold. I'd like to say something, I said to the mediator. Of course. I turned to face my mother directly. You're right that you have the right to distribute your assets as you see fit, and I'm not here to take that away from you. I'm here to make sure that when you distribute your assets, you do it consciously, not because you've been convinced by people with financial incentive to keep you making certain choices, not because you've told yourself a story about my independence that justifies giving me less. My mother looked away. I've been in therapy because I've been trying to understand how my own mother could love me less, how she could miss my graduation for my brother's barbecue, how she could invest money in his failed business but make me pay for my own car insurance, how she could write a will that tells me, legally and forever, that I was right not to expect her support. Sarah, my mother said quietly, I'm not finished. I've documented every conversation, every choice. Every moment where you told yourself that loving one child less was the same as loving another child more. And I have used that documentation to build a legal case that would expose all of it. Public court documents, jury testimony, your diary, probably. Your financial records, definitely. All of it public. The room was completely silent. But I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to ask you to look at what you've actually done and to make a choice about what happens next. I pulled out a document and placed it on the table. I'm proposing a settlement. You split your estate equally between me and Thomas. $150,000 each from your estate. Thomas keeps the house. I don't want it. You can give him whatever gifts you want while you're alive. But legally, formally, you acknowledge that I deserve to inherit equally. Sarah, I can't ask Thomas to give up the house. I'm not asking you to ask Thomas anything. I'm asking you to rewrite your will to reflect that my inheritance is equal in monetary value. How Thomas and I choose to distribute that is up to us. But legally, you are going to say that we matter the same. She was crying now. Real crying. Not the manipulative kind. The kind that comes when you actually understand what you've done. And if I don't, she asked, then I file the lawsuit. Your attorney's conflicts of interest come out. The unfairness of your will becomes public record. And every family member and friend you know will have to take a side. Everyone will know exactly how you feel about me, and you'll lose both of us. It was a threat wrapped in logic. My mother looked at Thomas. Thomas looked at me. I'll give her half of what I would have gotten, he said quietly. Sarah, I'll do that. I don't want to fight you. It was an easy gesture for him. It cost him nothing and solved the problem. But he was also admitting that he understood the injustice, that he'd known the whole time that it wasn't fair. My mother put her hands on the table. I need to talk to my attorney privately, she said. The mediator nodded. They left the room. Martin and I sat in silence. That was brilliant, he said eventually. That was a threat. It was an informed legal threat. There's a difference. 30 minutes later, they came back. My mother looked destroyed. I'll rewrite the will, she said. Equal inheritance, cash equivalence, you're right that you deserve that. Thank you. But I need you to understand something, she said. I need you to know that I didn't do this to be cruel. I did this because I was scared. I was scared that Thomas wouldn't make it on his own. I was scared that if I didn't help him, he would fail. And I was so scared of that possibility that I made you smaller so he could be bigger. It was an apology, dressed up in an explanation. It was the kind of thing a therapist would call progress. I heard it as, I was scared, so I chose to hurt you. Okay, I said. And I meant it. I was accepting her explanation. I was moving on. But I wasn't forgiving her. Not really. 6 months later, I received the rewritten will. $150,000 to me. $150,000 to Thomas. The house split in terms of equity. Thomas could keep it, but he owed me $75,000 from my share, which he could pay over time with interest. It was equal. It was fair. It was something I'd had to threaten my mother to achieve. The morning I received it, I called Uncle Harold. It's done, I said. How do you feel? I thought about the question. I feel like I won something, but I'm not sure it was worth what it cost. And what did it cost? My mother will never forgive me. Not really. She thinks I was cruel to her. She thinks I weaponized her diary and her therapy and her love for Thomas against her. She doesn't understand that I was just holding up a mirror. Can she understand that? No, because it would require her to look at what's in the mirror, and she spent 30 years running from that reflection. A few weeks later, I got a call from Thomas. He wanted to meet for coffee. I said yes, because I was curious what he would say. We sat at a small place near my apartment. He looked exhausted, not just tired, but emotionally depleted, the way you look when you've had to reckon with yourself. I owe you an apology, he said. For what? For being the one she chose, for letting her choose me, for taking money from her when I knew it was wrong, for letting you take the weight of being the strong one. You didn't make her choose you. No, but I let her. I accepted it. And that's the same thing, isn't it? I didn't answer. I'm paying back what she gave me, he said. All of it, not just the $5,000 I already paid. The whole $180,000. I'm going to take a loan out and I'm going to pay it back. She won't let you. Then I'll do it anyway. I'll put it in an account in her name. I'll force her to accept it. Because I'm not going to live the rest of my life knowing that I was the favorite in a way that cost my sister her relationship with her mother. I looked at my brother, who I demonized in my head as the problem, the golden child, the favorite, and I saw someone who'd been just as trapped as I was. He'd been trapped in the role of needing help. I'd been trapped in the role of not needing it. And neither of us had been allowed to be real. I forgive you, I said. I'm not sure you should. Maybe not, but I'm doing it anyway. He paid back the money. It took him 5 years, but he did it. My mother took the payments with resentment. She felt like he was rejecting her gift. She felt like he was saying, I didn't need you after all, and that hurt her. But it mattered, to Thomas, to me, to the truth of what had actually happened. As for my mother, she and I found a new equilibrium. Not closeness, not warmth. Just a careful distance where we could both exist without one of us having to deny herself. I call her on holidays. She calls me on my birthday. We have dinner occasionally, and it's pleasant in the way that interactions with people who have hurt you can be pleasant, with effort and the kind of kindness that comes from accepting that change isn't possible. She never writes another diary entry about me. I know this because I never checked. At some point, I realized I didn't need to monitor her thoughts anymore. I had won by forcing her to acknowledge the truth. And the truth, it turns out, is not always enough to change someone's heart. But it's enough to change your own. My doctorate means something different to me now. It's not an achievement my mother should have celebrated. It's an achievement I celebrate. On my own. With people who chose to be there. Because in the end, that's what the whole thing was really about. Not the money. Not the fairness of the will. Not even the revenge, though I got that too. It was about standing in a room and saying, I exist, my feelings are real, my hurt is valid, and I will no longer allow you to rewrite my story so you can feel better about your choices. It was about becoming the author of my own narrative. And making sure that no one, not my mother, not my brother, not the world, could convince me that my worth lay in my willingness to make myself smaller. That day at that mediation table, when I watched my mother finally understand what she'd done, that was the moment I stopped being her daughter in the way she'd defined it. Strong, independent, unwilling to need her. And I became something else. I became the kind of woman who knows exactly what she deserves. And who will move mountains to make sure she gets it. The quiet ending. I'm sitting in my apartment now. It's quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes. My doctorate is framed on the wall. My actual diploma, not the photo. I see it every morning when I wake up. No one chose to be in that photo with me that day. I've made peace with that. I have friends now who understand, who see me, who don't need me to be strong all the time. My mother will never be one of those people. And that's okay. Because I learned something through all of this. You can't force someone to love you differently. You can't sue love into fairness. You can't document someone into change. All you can do is tell the truth as loudly and clearly as possible, and then step back and let people decide if they want to believe it. Some people will. Some won't. And that's not your responsibility anymore. What's your responsibility is never again making yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. What's your responsibility is knowing exactly what you deserve. And what's your responsibility is having the courage to demand it. Even when the cost is the person you love. Even when the cost is everything. Because in the end, the only person whose version of your story matters is yours. And I'm never letting anyone rewrite mine again.